Welcome back to Talking Country with Brad and Chancey. Guys, beautiful week again. Here we are on another beautiful Sunday sitting with you guys, and can't wait to discuss a few things we have to talk about today with y'all.
Good morning, Bradley. Happy to be back. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Now, hey, the things we got to talk about today have to do with something that we've kind of mentioned here the last few episodes about disking and shredding and that type of thing.
And we've brushed on supplemental feeding, as well.
We brushed on that. And so that kind of brings us up to summer and spring food plots, which is time for. And so hopefully you've been doing your shredding and your disking in order to prepare for this type of thing. Because as it is, this is basically farming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And, when we talk about food plots, particularly spring and summer food plots for deer, dove, or turkey, or quail, or whatever it is, one of the things I run into most is just the proper planting of them, because it is a lot like farmers just don't go out there and start planting. They prepared the year before to plant that crop.
And it seems like so many people will come in here and it'll be March and they'll say, hey, do you have any summer food plot blends? And we'll be like, yes, we do. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm thinking about doing that. And, you could tell they didn't prepare too much for it. Sure. And that stuff's expensive.
Yes, it is.
So when you plant it, you want it to come up.
You want it to do well. And so you need to be thinking, first, like, where is a good place to plant a food plot where you're going to get the most production out of it? So,
and depending on how big your place is, there's different, I guess, sizes of a food plot that would fit a certain place, I guess, depending on how many deer you have. The other things these deer may have to eat.
Sure, the quality of habitat. If you're supplementing with feed, if you're running a pelleted supplement feed, that can factor into it. Also, if you're putting out cottonseed, but if you just want to add more food out there for them, give them more choices, then, I kind of think if you're doing all that other stuff and managing from a deer standpoint, anywhere from about 3 to 5% of your total acreage,
which is not too bad. I mean, if you figure you have a 100-acre place, that's 3 to 5 acres.
Yeah, and if you're, if you want to go bigger, of course, go bigger. To me, 5 to 10 acres is even better. Especially, I think there's been some research like for deer and turkey. A minimum of 3 acres, they seem to. The turkey will come out and utilize it more. The opening deer feel not too big, but the way that you lay it out and where we're talking about planting and where to put them, near your brush or near your cover areas, you need to think about that. But, 3 to 5% of your acres is a good rule of thumb, but you can definitely go bigger.
And now you hear the word food plot and you automatically think of deer. But so many birds, there's so many good bird blends. There's so many things you could do to attract dove and different wild birds that are really nice to look at. And spring and summer food plots are great for attracting birds for dove season.
Oh, absolutely. And then not only that, like so many, we think of dove season and dove hunters, first thing that pops in my mind is sunflowers,
Yes, it is.
And shoot.
But if you look at a bag of bird seed that you buy at the store, look at the things that are in it.
Yeah.
That's all good stuff that is good for food plots.
Yeah, especially for birds, like all the German foxtail millets and sorghums and milos and, sesame, all that stuff.
We're not planting a food plot for birds to graze on. We're planting it now for the seed, mostly for the seeds that they're going to graze on come late summer.
Sure. And even if you planted a bird plot, and I know there's a lot more grass-type species in bird plots, but if you got sunflower in there, deer are going to hit it. Deer are going to come utilize as well. But they make specific food blends that you can buy a blend or you can mix it your own to target specific species, whether it be deer, dove, quail, turkey, or both, So.
And regardless of which one you pick, you're going to be farming.
Yeah, you're going to be farming. Yeah. So you're going to be farming. You need to pick the right spot, So in general, kind of way I look at it, in our neck of the woods in Central Texas and heck, most areas, if corn will grow there, if it's not too wet for corn and it'll grow there, then probably it'll grow a food plot just fine.
Now, the only thing you may need to look at is maybe soil pH.
Sure, you need a soil test.
A lot of things will grow in alkaline soils that won't grow in the sandy or acidic soils. So you need to pick a blend, that kind of fits it all. But which is why location, I guess, which is going to be the first thing we're going to talk about here, is important when you pick your location for your food plot as to where am I going to put this thing?
Yeah.
Because you kind of need to have, even though it's not deer season, if it's for deer, you kind of need to have in mind where you would like to be, perhaps maybe even planting a fall plot come come the fall for hunting season. You don't want to be disking up a lot of ground, 2 different places, and maintaining 2 different spots of ground for this.
Unless you got that ability and want to do that. I mean, I know some landowners that do I want to stick to just spring and summer, but we have to mention fall because, a lot of landowners will, plant a spring one and then till it up and then plant it fall and utilize the same field to put a food plot in for the summer and then hunt over it in the fall. Now, if that's what you're going to do, you need to be thinking about placement from a stand, like a deer stand, if you're going to hunt it from a deer standpoint. And also access. I like to be able to, if I'm going to hunt a food plot, you want to be able to access and sneak into your deer stand. Like you don't want to have to drive across your food plot or walk across your food plot in order to get into your deer stand. So it's best to think about location areas so where you can park a specific spot, a parking spot that's away, and you can sneak into the back of your stand where you don't blow deer out of the food plot that's out there or whatever. So you can sneak in your stand. So that's important from a location if you have that. But like I said, if you got a big enough place and you've got time on your hands, some people do fall only food plots and spring only food plots. But for most landowners, it's like Bradley said, you don't want to be doing 2 different spots and way over the place and moving equipment left and right. So just something to think about location-wise.
And something that a lot of people will forget, you might see this nice little opening in the woods that you're like, man, if I planted a food plot here, the deer would love it. But some people forget how important sunlight is to plant growth.
Yes.
And so you don't want this to be sitting in the middle of a little opening in the woods somewhere. It needs to be kind of out in the open, maybe with a buffer zone in between.
Oh, yeah. And like you say, it's competition. Number one, little small areas, aren't going to receive the same use from anything just because of space required. But then also, like I said, light. Plants need light, especially most of our food plot mixes. They like full sun. Now, I'm not saying there's some stuff that won't grow in the shade and can tolerate, 50% shade throughout the day, but most of
a lot of your broadleafs will, but your grasses definitely not.
No, and in a lot of your deer food plots, they have a little more forbs in them, but still a lot of those forbs are, lab or soybeans or cow peas, especially, forage peas. And they like full sun as well, so be thinking about that. But then like Bradley said, the bigger the better. You want your food plot where it's adjacent to cover, of course. And what we talked about, that disking and shredding. In my opinion, it's very important on your food plots to think about leaving a buffer strip between. So, okay, perfect example. Say you're going to you're starting from scratch. You're going to make a 5-acre food plot, and it's adjoining this woodland edge. The more edge you can get on your food plot to cover, the better. Best to leave like a buffer strip.
Because it's important to remember that deer are edge feeders.
Species. And so the more edge you can create with your food plot, that's the better it's going to be for everything. Quail, turkey, deer, but particularly deer. And particularly for deer, if you leave a buffer strip of like 20 or 30 yards from the time you leave the woods to the where the food plot starts, let that just grow up and get rank.
Now, if you disc it, you're going to have a lot of neat stuff coming up there.
So think about what we talked about last episode, disking, or last 2 episodes, disking and food plots and how you work these together and they go hand in hand. You could disc the boundary, a 20 or 30 yard boundary along the edge, along next to the woodland. You can disc that now. You're going to have a native food plot there, native stuff that's going to come up. Don't shred that. Just let that grow and grow through the summer and rank. But then inside there, plant your food plot in a warm season plot.
So now you've basically got 2 food plots going on.
Yeah, you got
a native one around the outside edges, and then you're going to have your what you've planted growing in the middle.
And this is really important if you're going to use the same food plot to hunt in. And I say this, but we're planting stuff out there because we like to hunt deer, for the most part, or hunt birds, there. But from a deer standpoint, that buffer strip of 20 to 30 yards, it makes them feel safer. They utilize the food plot more, especially if it's 3 to 5 acres. And I've sat there and I've watched too many bucks. And it's also important from a hunter standpoint. From targeting a specific deer standpoint or hunting, if you got a deer that's coming to a particular food plot or a particular area, that buffer strip, a lot of times, if that's not there and you just plant food plot straight up to the edge of the woods, a lot of times those deer will sit in there in the woods and you don't particularly see them, but they're glassing that field. And if you're moving around in the stand or glassing a doe or a little young buck over there might be a buck sitting in those woods that's watching that field before he comes out there, and you never even see him because he saw you first and he never walks out. But that 20 or 30 yard buffer strip, he can't see through there as good to see what's growing on that field. And if you let it grow tall, like giant ragweed and goldenrod and Yankee weed and white bone set, just all solidagos, all this junk, or weeds that come up in the ragweed, and in the fall time, are starting to mature. Let it grow tall, just that buffer strip. It makes him feel safer, especially a buck. He'll walk through there, and a lot of times from a hunter standpoint, you can see his antlers. You can see his antlers and the stuff you can't tell, but it allows you time to get ready. If you recognize the deer and it's one you're after, you're like, oh, that's him, he's coming. And you can go ahead and get in position, and that deer hadn't even seen you yet because he's dealing with all that other stuff.
Compared to him sitting on the edge of the woods in the brush.
Yeah, because I've watched them. They'll still get to that edge of that buffer strip, and they'll still glass that food plot
before they come out.
Yeah, they'll observe it, especially older bucks, And so that buffer strip helps in a lot of different ways. It serves multiple purposes, and I think from making those deer feel secure is one of the most important. Not only does it add, a native food plot as well.
And if you think about this buffering, this disking, this buffer zone, that's perfect for burning.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you're going to do it in the fall time, you disc your buffer zone around the outside edge, and then you can burn off what you perhaps might no-till your food plot into come springtime when it's time to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of folks, too, it's designed, and you can change them from year to year, but a lot of times you'll have one plot, but people will have disc strips in the middle, or a disc on the outside, for sure I recommend, but also disc strips in the middle. And those strips in the middle can be planted with, a native warm season grass that provides cover, like switchgrass or little blue stem, or big blue stem, or Indian grass, something tall, or it can be used as you can have summer plots and winter plots in the same field by your timing of each,
Yeah, that way come time to plant your fall food plot, you don't have to destroy your summer food plot too early.
Let it ride.
Let it ride there, because for your birds and stuff, that's going to be prime time for them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you're trying to, we're all out there trying to make the most out of what we have.
And it's very enjoyable.
Yes,
to plant something and watch it grow.
Yeah, it is. I think every single one of us, we're born with it. Whether you're a farmer, and thank God for our farmers, or you just like to grow tomatoes, there's something nice about planting a seed, watering it,
and watching it grow.
Yeah,
so I guess that kind of takes care of location. You want to, how far? What do you think? How big does this buffer zone need to be?
And I would say about 20 yards. About 20 yards. Which is pretty big.
And need to be sure this is well drained soil.
Yeah, well drained soil.
Like I said, if this is a spot on your place where nothing's growing at, probably shouldn't put a food plot blend there, because there's some reason. It's either too wet, it's too rocky, it's too something.
Yeah, shallow soils.
There's a reason that nothing's growing there. So pick a place where you've got a lot of good growth at, like where, looks like good fertile soil.
Do a soil test, Go out there, take a soil test. That's pivotal. When you're picking your spot, go take a soil test. And if you're in East Texas or east of here, lime. You usually got to add lime or gypsum or whatever, in the right amount that the soil test recommends. So that's important as well. Something I want to just mention, since we're talking about deer, but it's this food plots, bird plots for doves, specifically doves. If you can think about location from a dove standpoint, I know we always think, water, put it by stand, but it's really nice if you can put about a 5 or 10 acre dove plot next to our border. There's a gravel road and also a power line, utility line right away. Because our dead trees and utility line right-of-ways are magnets for doves. They just like to be able to see real good around them, and then that gravel road has all that grit on it.
They can pick the grit up off of there, sure.
Yeah, and then if you add to that, you have a water source nearby, make sure you spray the edges of the water source with like glyphosate or something. Basically, dove don't like to walk through a lot of thick vegetation.
And usually tank dams are pretty thick.
Yeah,
there's a lot of thick stuff growing.
Unless it's like September when we're hunting doves and you've grazed that pasture and the cattle, and usually the water's lower, and when the water's lower, then you have bare ground. Dove like to water at tanks with bare ground is what I'm getting at. So if you can provide all those things when you're choosing your food plot, put it next to a gravel road. If you got if you might not have these on your place, but if you do, try to work them together and you'll increase your success.
Absolutely. It's kind of like putting a syrup tub for cows next to the hay roll.
Yeah.
Or next to the tank. Like the farther away from the things they use every day you put it, the less you're going to get, the less use you're going to get out of it. And now, don't get Chancey wrong. He's not telling you to shoot dove off of a gravel road.
Yeah, no, don't hunt on them. Yeah, don't drive around with 22 mags or 17s and skillet shoot doves off power lines by any means.
Yeah. I just wanted to make that clear.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Don't tell the game warden that Chancey said that you could shoot dove
This
off a
is
gravel
if
road.
you've got a driveway, a gravel driveway on your property.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes. Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
So we got a location. Okay,
Yes,
so where everything grows, a buffer zone in between the woods and your food plot.
Yeah.
For birds, next to water, next to gravel roads where they pick grit up, because birds have to have gravel in order to grind
Sure.
food up in their stomach. All birds do. So that's what Chancey means about that. They'll pick up little pebbles and stuff, and it grinds their food up for them so they can digest it. That's why you always see birds on gravel roads. You need the proper drainage. You need sunlight. And all these types of things. Okay, so now that we have a location, preparation comes up.
Yes.
Okay, this is where we were talking about earlier. Somebody coming in the store in March and saying, "Hey, I'm going to plant a food plot. What seeds do I need to do it?"
Yeah.
Because there is what they call no-till, which is one way of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
To do no-till planting, you have to have what they call a no-till drill. Not a cheap piece of equipment. Definitely not a cheap piece of equipment to maintain. Lots of moving parts.
Sure.
Takes a lot of abuse, planting into hard dirt and stuff. So no-till is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think so. It's the best way to do it if you have those means.
And if you're local, Chancey does this for a living. He'll come out and do it for you. He's got all the equipment and knows exactly what to plant and where to plant it, and he can really help you with that. Otherwise, you got to disc it. The key to farming any particular crop, you got to get rid of competition.
Amen.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen just overnight. You're going to have to start that in the fall time. So in the fall, you need to be preparing for your spring food plots.
Yes, and even if you till drill, you need to be thinking in the spring or the previous summer. So much, Brad, and it's human nature, and I'm guilty of it too. We want it now. We want big deer yesterday. We want, if we're thinking about a spring food plot, we probably, unless we were prepared, we want it. Let's start today and get it done.
You're so busy. It's understandable.
Yes.
Yeah, life is busy. You forget about it. But if you're going to do it right, and that stuff is expensive,
you
want to do it right.
Yes. And so one of the things so you got a location picked. Now you got to go out and assess what's there, what's growing right there. Now, if it's already an existing field that's been farmed for years, that's easy. It's taken care of. You know what's there. But if it's not.
Let's say it's an oats patch where you graze calves at all winter or something like that. That's probably in good shape.
Oh, yeah. You can work with that all day long. But say you're creating one, or if you just bought a piece of property and it was native ranger, you're going to.
Or worse, Bermuda grass.
Bermuda grass. Or you may solid yopine, you need to bulldoze something down or mulch something out of the area to create an opening.
That's
you've got
true.
all different scenarios that you've got to work with. But one of the ones that we deal with a lot is a lot of them want to have native range, and sometimes the places are undergrazed and have too much grass. Sometimes they're overgrazed and there's no perennial grasses. But with a warm season food plot, competition, like Bradley was saying, is absolutely key, critical. Particularly competition from warm season grasses. So if you go out there and say what was growing last year, you need to be thinking about if what was in that food plot was Bahia grass or coastal Bermuda or Johnson grass or something like that, a grass that grows, can be native or exotic, that grows in the warm season, it's going to compete against your warm season food crop if you don't.
And perhaps overtake it because there's a seed bank there.
Root system.
There's a root system established. It's going to be well prepared to outcompete whatever it is you're going to try to do if you're just going to go out there and march and plant.
Yes, because like Brad said, a lot of us don't have access to a no-till drill. So what do? We go out there and march and we disc the daylights out of it. Well, guess what? Disking only helps Bermuda grass and some of your perennial grasses if you do it in March.
Bermuda grass right when it's starting to green up or right before. When you need to be disking for your food plot.
Yes.
Bermuda loves that.
Not only that, like we talked about, what does disking do? It creates its own food plot by it takes every weed that's been sitting there in that soil bank for the last 20 years and it exposes it, brings it to the top, and guess what? When it gets rain and sunshine on it, it's going to grow. So you just created competition,
which is great if that was your goal, was to create this growth. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to try to plant how much dollar per bag of food plot blend?
Well, it's about, depending on what you get, anywhere from $30 to $40 an acre probably to plant.
So if you got to do it right.
Yeah, it's best to definitely do it right. And if you're going to put that time, you want your stuff to grow. You don't want to be choked out with a bunch of, I say ragweed.
The stuff you're trying to get rid of.
Ragweed, I don't want to choke it all out because it will happen. And then when that stuff starts really taking off and you want your food plot to be growing in May and June, that's when your native worms or even your warm season grasses are going to start growing like crazy. And if you didn't get them killed, they're going to outcompete. And that's probably the number one issue that I see landowners run into is they go out there and it's a time thing. It's a time thing and a money thing and a planning thing. They do it this year and want a really good food plot that spring, but competition kills them. And for those two reasons. So a perfect world, if you're just go with a no-till drill method and you had those warm season grasses out there, it'd be best to start the previous summer. Go in there with glyphosate and kill that area with Roundup. If it's
while it's actively growing, don't wait for it to freeze to come and then go do it.
You need to hit it in late May.
Because I forget what the rate is of Roundup that you have to put on the coastal Bermuda grass to kill it.
It depends. If it's super well established in clay soils, it's harder to kill than in sandy soils. In clay soils, Parks and Wildlife, and we've done it to kill like plant native grasses. Sometimes we got to hit it initially with at least 4 quarts per acre. The next time you got to hit it with 2 quarts per acre.
As soon as it starts to green back out again.
Back up, which may be, within a month and a half. And it takes a long time. You may have to spray it 3 times. It takes all summer long. You got to take that plot out of production for a year, basically, to try to get it killed, get your competition. Sandy land, it's a little easier to kill for some reason. I guess the clay soils, the roots don't hold up. But sandy land, sometimes it appears to be a little easier to kill, but still a booger bear.
It has a hard time in clay soils growing anyway. Compared to sand, that stuff will grow like crazy in sand.
Yeah, but for some reason, if it gets established in good clay soils, it's harder to kill. Which is strange, but it is. It's just harder.
That is really odd.
They recommend, I guess it's the roots or something. They recommend a higher rate of it, when trying to do like planting native grass or something. Because that's something we deal with a lot is trying to, take Bermuda grass or Bahia grass or some warm season grass and put it into native, to establish nesting cover or fawning cover or whatever. But from a food plot standpoint, if you're going to no-till it, try to, and you've got those warm season grasses out there, spray them, get them killed, then keep an eye on it, and then come this time spring, be looking at it March, late February, see what's growing out there. And it's best to go out there and look at all your little warm or cool season weeds that are just starting to grow up, your geraniums and your chickweeds and all these things that are just starting to grow. Go in there and hit them with glyphosate again at about 2 quarts per acre. And I'm really looking to at that time of year, y'all. Johnson grass is a huge issue with a lot of these warm season food plots. And most of the time in central Texas, now you get far north Texas, maybe not the case. Most of the time in central and south Texas, Johnson grass will start growing at about end of February and, even the first week of March. You can see little tiny seedling Johnson grasses coming up. And that's a good time to spray it because, hit it with like 2 quarts per acre. It'll knock out your young Johnson grass. It'll knock out any of those cool season forbs. Usually do that in about middle of March, something like that. And take care of that, and then plan on trying to get it planted by April 15th. And then that way, theoretically, your warm season grasses were killed the previous year. All your cool season stuff is there. You're fixing to hit it, so that takes out that competition. There's that thatch there, and you can no-till drill right into that.
Gives it something good to grow in.
Yeah, you didn't deplete your soil moisture by digging. So if you do have, or by disking it, or plowing it, that's one option. And that's like Bradley said. The other option is to do it like a farm field. To disc it real good, try to prepare. Have it competition, and then maybe use a cultipacker.
Well, to be directly honest with you, even if you're going to do the conventional method, you're not going to plow a Bermuda grass out. You're going to have to have a sprayer.
Yeah.
The only way to kill that stuff is going to be chemically because it loves to be plowed. It's not going to – you'll never plow Bermuda grass out, to be honest with you. So you're going to have – even a conventional method, you're still going to have to spray that stuff.
You got to get rid of the competition.
Perhaps burning would help.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm working with a landowner in Robertson County right now. And he didn't have a Bermuda grass, but what he had was a lot of place had been grazed in the past pretty heavily, so he didn't have much perennial grass, perennial warm season, but he did have a lot of annual, like 3-awns and, tridents and little annual stuff, little annual grasses and annual weeds. But it was enough to carry a fire. When he sent me pictures but it was decadent, so he went in there and burned it off just last week. And now we're going to wait and come about March. We'll look and see what's growing, anything that's greening up, and we'll hit it with like probably 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate and then try to plant it, try to time it around the April 15th. is where I try to shoot for. Because a lot of these warm season grasses, they're like cotton, y'all. You need to plant them when the soil temperatures get a little warmer.
Yes, and me and Chansey actually talked about it. If you're going to disc this buffer zone around your food plot too, this transition zone from the woods to your food plot, that'd be a good time to burn it too. If you do this in the fall time, disc it around there a few times and burn all this Bermuda grass off.
Yeah, and what's good about with the Bermuda grass too, or that if you got annual stuff out there, you hit it with a fire this time of year, any of your little forbs and broadleaves that are up already, it's going to set them back big time. So like burning right now theoretically would hurt your bluebonnets that are already up. But if you got like camphor weed and a bunch of just junk weeds out there that's going to be competition that's already coming up, then burning it right now will, I'm not going to say it's going to smoke them and, they'll be totally not there, but it's going to set them way back. You're going to have way less competition.
Absolutely. And one other thing, too, that you might be doing, so if you're going to start this in the fall, which you should, or in the late summer to start spraying your Bermuda grass you're going to get rid of.
Sure.
That would also be probably the time that if your soils are deficient in phosphorus and potassium, that would probably be the time that you would do that, seeing as how it takes a good while for that to get, especially no-tilling.
Yes.
Phosphorus and potassium don't move down through the soil profile very fast. Especially if you're not going to plow it in, so it's going to need to be put out pretty early to get down there and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a good chance if this is an area that you haven't used for a long time, that perhaps it could be deficient in phosphorus and potassium or something, depending on what was growing there before.
Sure, an old field, if you purchase a property, you don't know the exact history, land use history on what, was previously there. That's why soil tests are super important in location that we talked about earlier. It's pretty key.
As far as preparation goes, again, starting to fall, to get rid of these warm season grasses, especially Bermuda grass, that type of thing. And you don't want to plant it too early in the springtime.
No.
Because, you get a freeze. Yes, you could get a freeze. And B, you can eliminate the competition that could be coming up at the same time. When we plant corn, it's all Roundup resistant. You can go out there, you plant your corn, it comes up, competition comes up, you go out there, you spray Roundup over the top. Kills everything that's not corn, or different herbicides that you could do. But on these food plots as they go, you can't typically do that.
No,
so
Roundup will smoke them. Yeah.
So you're going to have to wait, until some of this warm season stuff has had a chance to come up to eliminate it, so that it's not trying to come up all at the same time and ruining what you're trying to do, especially Johnson grass and Bermuda grass.
Because it's just competition. They compete for water. They compete for sunlight. Eventually, their roots are already established. Just think what you're planting. It's germinating this year. It's putting a little tiny seed, root down. So it's not established yet. It's trying to become established. But it's competing against something that's already got a well-formed root system that can just take off. So you're trying to get that competition for everything reduced. And like I said, the main thing, y'all, is assess your place quick. If you don't have any of these warm season grasses, they're not an issue. You can get by with just disking it, a little bit if you don't have that competition. If all you got's weeds, or if it's, so see what's growing there first and then make that decision.
So here's how a no-till drill would work. You would go in there in the fall, you would kill everything with your Roundup, with your herbicides. And then all of a sudden March comes around, soil starts to warm up, all your warm season competition starts to come up. You spray it again with Roundup, or you go ahead and no-till. You get your no-till drill, you no-till drill it in, and then you spray Roundup right over the top of that after you plant it. Or you could spray it ahead of time. Either way, depending on what kind of competition you have, you just got to get it done before the seeds come up.
Yes,
so that's easy. Disking, on the other hand, you're probably still going to have to spray the stuff in the fall. Then you're going to come back in March. Then you're going to, probably maybe even a little earlier, maybe late February or so, and go ahead and start scratching the dirt to get you some loose dirt worked up. Now, most people who don't have a no-till drill, they're probably going to go out there and spread it with a spreader on a four-wheeler, on a spreader, three-point spreader, some type of method of putting it out like
broadcast.
That. Okay? And so what some people will then do is they'll go disc it over again and throw some dirt up on it. Now, depending on how soft you've had the soil ahead of time, some of these seeds like to be planted a little deeper than the other ones. The smaller the seed, typically the shallower you got to plant it, because it doesn't have the seed vigor to get out of the ground like what your bigger seeds do. Or your grasses have a lot of vigor to come up through the ground, but your sunflower seeds, they can't be planted too deep because they can't push through a lot of deep soil. So if you're going to go out there and disc it, You don't want to disc it too deep, and if you're going to disc it, you're going to have to increase the seeding rate as compared to no-till drilling because you're not going to get the stand after, with disking in seeds that you would have gotten with your no-till drill.
Yeah. So in general, like if you're going to broadcast it, like Bradley said, it's usually double the rate. If you're going to just go as a rule of thumb.
And this happens with hay. People will try to
Everything.
broadcast hay grazer. They'll try to broadcast a lot of things and disc them in oats.
But the size of the seed is critical, y'all, because like the little small seeds, a 1/4 inch, they can't be any deeper than that, or they won't germinate. They'll fail. Some of the bigger ones you can get by with an inch. I set my no-till to plant everything about a 1/2 inch. It can't go any deeper than a 1/2 inch. So a 1/2 inch is exactly how deep as it can go. But
which is a good dip.
That means you're planting your sunflowers, you're planting any of your soybeans if you're planting soybeans for a deer food plot, and you're also planting your little bitty stuff too, because it's also if it's planting no deeper than a 1/2, you're planting some at a 1/4 as well. It's just the way that it works, because there's microsites everywhere. So seed size is really critical, and if you're broadcasting, like Bradley said, so many people will disc it, then broadcast it, then disc it over again, and then they'll get less stand. They won't have as diversity if they're planting a mix. Now, if you're only planting a single monoculture, that's fine, but it can't be too deep. So depending on what you're planting.
And a lot of times clods are an issue or something.
Yeah.
Your disc is going to throw up clods of dirt, and that's not going to be something good to drill into.
Seed to soil contact, y'all. Good seed to soil contact is critical, and it makes the plant germinate better. So if you're not going to drill it in, you don't have those means, then get it disked and smooth as you can get. Use a hair and drag it if you have to. And me, especially for smaller type seeds, I like to culti-pack it before you broadcast it.
To crush all the clods.
Crush the clods, kind of make a well-prepared seed bed. It's not just super soft, but it's soft, but it's kind of packed. It's kind of hard. Then broadcast it, and then culti-pack it again.
Now this works well, but the only problem is birds are going to be an issue with this. Because the seeds aren't covered with much dirt.
No.
If you had clods or something like that, perhaps it crushes the clods and it covers it up a little bit. A harrow is a good way.
Yeah.
You could spread it out there and then pull a drag harrow over the top. Sure. It's going to cover it a little bit.
People plant it like that all the
time.
time.
And then pull a cultipacker over top of it.
Yeah, and if you don't have means to a cultipacker or a harrow, then go chop down a cedar tree. I've done that before.
Just drag it over the top.
Just drag it over the top. Hook it behind a four-wheeler with a chain or a rope. I planted native grasses and wildflowers and food plots that same way, and guess what? Been successful.
What's really good is a piece of chain link fence. If you have that old wire from a chain link fence.
Or a cattle panel.
Panel with a log on top or something. It really does that. That's all you need.
Yeah, you just need. It can't be too deep. It's got to be good seed to soil contact. That's what's critical. You need some, so you just don't want to throw it out there and not have something that kind of firms it up and pushes it in the ground.
And it could be something as simple as driving your car around over the top of it.
I've seen that part. Yeah,
it doesn't take fancy equipment to do that with.
No.
But your depth is important. So you don't want to plant it too deep. Like Chancey said, a 1/2 inch is probably good for most of these things. And so you got to get your ground prepared for this. You got to get rid of all the competition. If you disc it, like Chancey said, pull a packer over it, pull a harrow over it, something to smooth it out, to bust it up, and then to cover your seed up. Okay, so that's all about preparation. Then I guess we could talk a little bit about fertilization, but fertilization, you could go as far as to do a soil sample on this if you wanted to, which involves going to your local extension office, picking up a little soil sample bag that they give you. You go out to several different. Don't get all your soil sample in one spot.
Yeah.
Go to get you a representative area of your plot. Go to 3 or 4 different locations. Get you a little scoop of soil, from the root depth, and put it into a bucket, and mix the dirt up good, and get you a sample, several samples from different areas. If it's big, if it's 3-5 acres, get you a scoop from 4 different areas, mix it together in a bucket maybe, and get you a representative sample that way. You could do that, but like I said, a lot of people is what they'll do. They'll put out a bag of triple 13, and that's fine. You'd probably do that, at one of your disking times, so that you get that the phosphorus and the potassium put down into the dirt profile.
Yeah, and I've even heard of some landowners, especially in the east, top dress food plots with fertilizer. Like you said, they're not getting the P and K, but
it's there for next year, maybe, or if you're going to have a food plot in the fall, it just doesn't dissolve in water and wash and leach through the soil like nitrogen does. You can top dress with a 3300 or something like that, urea, put it out there, and it'll get into the water. It'll wash it down to the root zone, become plant available quite readily. Then on the other hand, if you have your phosphorus and potassium, it's not going to do that near as fast. So that's the reason a lot of that is done in the winter or the fall. But you could put it out there, and then for next year, obviously it's going to make it better. So how much you need of that? Well, that just goes to however much you want to spend on it, basically. Yeah, if you don't have a soil sample to go off of, it's just hit or miss, whatever you think.
Yeah, I've heard people say, well, if you're not going to mess with it, just throw out 300 pounds an acre.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So everybody's got to,
and that is why we have algae growing in our our rivers and lakes.
Yeah.
But so you can't really. It's hard to judge if you don't have a soil profile. A soil sample. So you got to have a soil profile in order to grow it. That's not a very good use of words. You need to know what you're starting with, basically, and if your sandy soils are going to be poorer than your clay soils are, you're going to have to use a lot more fertilizer in the sandy soils than what you are in the clay soils, probably. But fertilization, is important to get it to grow good. You need something for it to eat to grow. But on the same token, you don't have to get too scientific with it unless you're just one of those kind of guys. That could be done at planting time, or you could wait for it to come up and then go over the top of it with some fertilizer. After you see what you're actually going to get to come up before you waste money on the fertilizer. At that point, probably a straight 3300 or something of that nature would be all you would need to utilize for that. Again, that's done probably at about the same time as planting, and so now is the time you got to choose a blend.
Yeah.
What am I going to plant? What am I going to feed? What am I looking for? What's what type of a?
What's your target species? Are you targeting both?
That's right. What area am I in? Am I in Am I in the east? Am I in the west? Am I dry? Am I wet? Yeah. All those things factor into what the blends that you need to pick.
And you say that, like I said, I like planting blends. Most of your good seed producers out there, they've got blends that are tried and true for your area. If you're east of here, try to use a seed source that's kind of fits your area. I wouldn't go buy a seed source from Tennessee and plant it in Central Texas and vice versa. Try to find something local. And most of those guys local, they've been doing it and planting it. Go ask them, what do you recommend? A lot of them have species-specific plots, I'm not trying to sell anything, but I use a lot of different seed sources. But one of them I use is Turner Seed. They have, a spring deer mix and a fall deer mix and a spring bird.
And they're in the Texas Panhandle, aren't they?
Yeah, Breckenridge, I think, somewhere. Yeah, they're somewhere in north of here. But they've got some good stuff that I've planted. And, of course, it's a mix, so there might be 10 different species of something. But I've planted in both clay and sandy soils, and something comes up, usually.
And variety is always good.
Yes, it is.
Or perhaps even the area, some things do better depending how sandy or the soil pH, that type of thing.
And so, if you're in the sand, plant you a mix unless you already have something in mind. I'm going to plant lab ladder. I'm going to go buy something from Mossy Oak, or I'm going to, go to Tecumani. You know what? By this time, most of the top tier stuff, they're all good stuff, so it's all about mainly they're all going to germinate, they're all going to do, but mainly it's preparation, get them seed to soil. So from a deer standpoint, some plants you can be thinking about with spring deer that are relatively cheap for a summer food plot, your cowpeas, black-eye cowpeas, forage cowpeas, ace cowpeas. Those all are good deer plant. You can drill those in or plant them with a conventional planter, or you can even, I've seen people broadcast them and pack them down, try to get them buried, but
more of the forbs. Your deer varieties are going to be.
Which peas are technically top forbs. And any of your forbs, so like okra, lab, soybean, that's good stuff, buckwheat, chicory. And one thing, too, that it'll be for birds, but sunflowers. Deer, they don't so much eat the seeds, but when it's growing, they'll dang near keep it from blooming because those deer just love sunflowers.
They love the fresh growth on those, the little leaves.
Yeah, they do. And they'll actually, when that sunflower starts trying to put on a little flower, they'll bite it off too. They just love it. And so a lot of times if you're planting like a bird mix or something that's got a lot of sunflowers in it too, deer are going to utilize the daylights out of it too, especially the younger grass type stuff. They'll eat them when they're real young and tender, but once they start getting older, you know, like we talked about in one of our previous episodes, they don't utilize the grass once it gets older. I guess something to talk about too, and you know, it depends. Some of your more arid type food plots generally work in areas where corn grow well. So areas about 30 inches, you know, that have at least 30 inches of rain a year, they do best. Now, if you start getting west and south of here where you've got way less, it's going to be a little bit harder to get them established, you know, very much. And so a lot of those people, like in South Texas, they would say, and even West Texas, well, if it rains enough that you can get a food plot to come up without irrigating it, it's such a good year, you probably don't even need a food plot.
There's plenty of other stuff for them to eat out there.
Yeah, and more arid regions. So when we're talking about food plots, you generally want at least around 30 inches a year, you know.
And the reason they're so beneficial here, there's a lot of monoculture of Bermuda grass and that those types of species around, you know, where if you do have something different like this, that it will attract wildlife.
You're going to pull deer, no doubt about it.
Deer, birds, all kinds. Well, birds are a little hard because we're a big farming area, so there's a lot of sorghum fields around on a typical year that will attract birds and that type of thing. But so many people will plant sunflowers and apparently does really well.
They do, especially in our calcareous or blackland prairie. Sunflowers, man, that's some of the best hunting you can get. But you know, dove season's been so weird here lately. You know, the last few years, it's just been weird years for birds here in the last several years. But doing this kind of stuff can definitely help. Like just for example, you were doing a spring dove mix, some stuff that does really.
But while you're on the topic, Chancey, before we forget, when you mentioned sunflowers, there's two different types of sunflowers.
Oh yes, yeah.
You got your native sunflowers.
Yeah. That
come up wild in the cotton fields and everywhere else. Small seed.
Very small, tiny seed, but dove love it. You know, they love the seed. So yeah, this is something real. I'm glad you brought this up, Brad, because this is important. So you got the little native ones, and then you got the hybrid black oil sunflower, you know.
Those are the big ones.
That are come up, and if you buy a mix like a spring dove mix, most of the time you got those hybrid oil ones, which they're good. They're fine. They plant easy, and you can plant them right now. You can plant them in April, the second week of April, and they'll germinate this April, and they'll come up. Now, another thing that you need to be aware of, like people say, well, I want to plant native sunflowers. And they want them to come up. Well, if you plant native sunflower this year, like for a spring plot, most of those native seeds, if they've hard, they have like an 80% plus dormancy rate because they need a scarification. They need to go through a winter in order to germinate. So you need to plant those native sunflowers in the fall, let them winter, and then they'll come up in the spring.
It takes the winter time for them to get acclimated, I guess you'd say. And
they need that scarification process to go through the winter. If you try to plant native sunflowers right now, you plant them right now expecting them for fall season to hunt, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah. It just they weren't out there long enough, and which is total opposite of your big sunflower. Like black oil sunflower seeds. Yes, and that's the ones you see in the birdseed mixes and that you buy for your bird feeders and stuff, or your big seeds.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these mixes too, like Milo, sesame, German foxtail millet's a good one. Brown top millet, that's all good dove stuff. And generally the maturation that you can get it in April, you know, and generally by dove season, you know, or into August, it's matured. The maturation's done. You can shred through there or graze through there, knock the seed down.
And it'll probably come up again next year.
Some of it will, yeah. You know, most of them will plant year to year. But, yeah, I mean, there's going to be some residue that's left over.
And so we got these bird mixes that they're more grasses.
Yes.
Than what they are things like alfalfa and peas and that type of stuff.
So think about your planting depth there too, y'all. So a lot of those don't. Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of those hybrid sunflowers and those bird mixes, they have, what's the word like that? They put I guess it says insecticide or pesticide. They're blue. They have the little blue.
Oh, they treat them.
Treat them, yeah.
Yeah, they're treated seed.
Yeah, so a lot of them's treated seed in these mixes, especially like your Milos and your
yes, they
your
are
sunflowers. But they plant real well. And they do really well in blackland prairies.
And easy to get up to. It's a
they
good
really
seed size. I mean, you could drag that in, you could disc it in, you could.
They get up easy.
Typically cheaper.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot to.
No, I mean, look at your bird feeder. You feed all winter long. Look underneath your bird feeder.
Solid stuff growing.
Milo and sesame and millet, all kinds of stuff growing underneath it. So
yes, very easy.
And you didn't till it or prepare it at all. It just came up from.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are like if you are a bird feeder and you're looking to attract birds, maybe move the placement of your bird feeder around several times over the year, and you'll get stuff spread out pretty quick there.
Yeah, sure could. Sure could, especially from like an annual thing if you're trying from that. So in general, but the bird plots generally are planted a little bit shallower because they have more smaller grass type seeds in it than versus like a deer plot that has more soybeans and
millet's a pretty little seed.
Yeah, it really is real small. So that's something we talk about. You can't get too deep. So moving on to like quail and turkey, and both of these they have a lot of forbs in it, because. For quail and turkey plots, and so deer will hit these as well, so you plant a quail and turkey plot, deer are going to get it. But some things that same thing, they're birds, so brown top millet, buckwheat, ace cowpeas, foxtail millet, again hybrid milo, some more sunflowers, okra, sorghum, alum, soybeans. That's all good quail turkey stuff. Turkey specifically, they really like chufa, which is, you hear a lot of people in the southeast now and in Sandyland planting chufa, which is a type of sedge.
I can't say I've ever heard of that.
It's a type of sedge, so it's not a grass. Sedges have edges. It's a type of sedge, but it makes these little nodules. I've always heard about it and read about it, but I've never planted it myself. Almost
like a nut sedge?
Yes, it is like a nut sedge, but the turkeys love it. They scratch the daylights out of it and really go after it, and it's perennial too. So a lot of people are really, they're kind of your turkey guys. They really kind of focus on that kind of stuff. One other one that I want to mention specifically for quail in South Texas, like at Pogue and Douglas King Seeds and Kennedy, they have, you can get what's called bee wild bundle flower and also lucena, which is like a type of a legume. But these are perennial. So you could plant these perennial ones, and quail, they absolutely love lucena from both the seed, food source, and for cover. And bee wild bundle flower is a kind of a woody species that becomes perennial, and it'll get big. It likes calcareous soils. It'll get real big. Deer love it. It's a great cover for quail. And it's also, like I said, deer love it for food, but also it's a type of bundle flower. It's called bee wild bundle flower, and it makes a good seed that birds absolutely love. So if you got an area and you're kind of, and this is the one drawback to it, is this stuff's pretty susceptible to hard frost. So they generally don't recommend planting this stuff, north of San Antonio. I've planted it here, and the frost did knock it back, but it did come back. It didn't kill it totally. But I love it from the standpoint of cover. You can get cover real fast with these plants, and they also provide a good food source.
And you probably can annually plant them here.
Yeah,
it's just may be too cold for them to come back next year.
Yeah, you can definitely plant them annually.
Probably a little more expensive.
No, I haven't price checked those, but yeah, I would imagine so.
Usually perennials. I know perennial rye is a whole lot more expensive than annual rye.
And at the time, I think you can now, but there at the time, you could only get bee wild bundle flower from Pogue, which is, down in South Texas. But some of those are kind of specific to that. So if you're south of here, it's something to maybe think about, especially from a cover standpoint for birds, for sure. And like I said, deer love it too. So it was one of those plants I really, really highly recommend for both deer and quail, and it's perennial summer if your conditions fit it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so I guess, did we mention already what our good blends would be for deer?
Oh, yeah, we said it'd be any of your cowpeas type stuff. A lot of your cowpeas, okra, lab, soybean, buckwheat.
And a lot of those things are good for soils.
Sure.
They really do good things for the ground. So you plant these peas and different things like that, and they actually make the soil profile better. Mm-hmm. Do a lot of good things for the ground. Along with being good food for deer.
Something else need to mention before we move off of that, though. If you're going to get that planted, get it and establish something really critical is put an exclosure out there, a little fenced-in area. All it has to be is a little small panel, about 12 foot, 18 feet in diameter that deer can't get to. And nothing. Stick that out in the middle of the field, anchor it with a T-post, And that way you can monitor your food plots, because so many times you're sitting there watching your food plot and like, man, my food plot's not doing no good. It's only 3 inches tall, but inside that enclosure it'll be 3 foot, in June. So
it's just too much competition.
Well, yeah, that and the deer are eating it.
That's what I mean. It's too much. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean competition. I mean, it's just overgrazing basically.
Yeah.
You think it's not growing, but it is. It's just being eaten up.
It really is, and most of that's happening at night.
And cameras could help with that.
Yeah, cameras for sure. And pellet counts. You go out there, see a lot of tracks. But even then, it's hard and it's difficult for me. It's hard to grasp just how many deer, because like I said, if you build a 5-acre food plot and you're next to some big cover, you're going to pull deer. You will. You'll pull them. And you can pull a lot of deer, and you got that food source out there. You're not thinking it's growing and doing real good. You're like, maybe I need to put some fertilizer on it. Maybe, they're just utilizing, and an exclosure out there helps you monitor it. I like it as a peace of mind. Say, no, my plot's doing great. It's just it's being used. It's serving its purpose.
Absolutely, and this goes along with protein feeding too. I think you mentioned to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the ability, and deer and wildlife are your goal, that's your goal. Then run some food plots out there. Put some protein pens out there and feed protein. Make a 60-foot. Pin them to keep the hogs and cattle out. Put some cottonseed in there. If you got that means and you're trying to keep it within carrying capacity of your habitat, it's just a supplement, and it helps. And
so if you have this little enclosure and you see that it's 5 foot tall in there and it's 2 inches tall everywhere else, odds are next year you either need a bigger food plot or you need to maybe get rid of some animals.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's all depending on your carrying capacity, and that's where your census and your surveys, that we talked about last time, your browse surveys, you're looking at, because they're eating that food plot. They definitely are, and they're eating that stuff, but they're also eating your native stuff too. Like they really are, and so that's why your carrying capacity is critical.
And it's probably important
to monitor all that stuff, and we do that with surveys and herd health and all kinds of different things that we're looking at.
It's probably going to be important to mention too, if wild hogs are an issue, you probably need to plan a little bigger food plot too.
Yes,
they like loose dirt that you plow up.
Dang hogs.
Insects seem to be shallower in the food plots, so they're going to really have a field day in there. So a half-acre food plot with a lot of hogs around probably isn't.
I've seen them destroyed overnight.
Yeah.
Overnight. All that work, all that effort. It's nothing more disappointing than to go out there the next day.
And really, you might need an electric fence. If you got cows in there, the electric fence will probably keep the cows out of it.
Yeah, and hogs don't like electricity either. If you build it right, you can keep pigs out too. They don't like
such a small area. If you put a double wire electric fence, maybe pretty low to the ground, odds are that would keep a good amount of them out of there. A little solar charger or something. That's what's handy about it.
And deer can still jump in, but then your phones can't utilize it.
Then you get that issue.
I mean, it's one of those things, give and take, y'all. If the hogs are destroying it, that's an option. Deer will jump. But deer don't like electricity either. So.
That's true. It gives and electric fences. In my past experiences in pastures, the deer will jump over and catch it with their feet and pull it off.
Yeah.
Pull the wire down. Well, then you got a shorted out fence that's not doing anything anyways. I see that a lot with those electric fences. So the height of it's probably going to be important.
Oh yeah, especially even if you're putting a pin around your protein feed or anything. You want to keep the hogs out but allow deer in. So. And we'll talk about that when we talk about supplemental feed specifically, like pellet feed, because that's a whole topic that we need to talk about. It's really important. A lot of people are doing it. But from a food stamp point, y'all, if you got cattle, try to move them from that pasture if you can, or you might be best to fence them because cattle are going to hit your food plot. And if you're planting it for wildlife, you don't want that.
Well, it's good unless it's birds. Sometimes it's good at the end of the season to turn your cows on it. Let them,
we talk about let
them knock it down.
August,
yeah.
Let them go in there and graze it, knock it down, create some bare ground. That'll be help tremendously.
And even the hoof pressure and all that will bring little forbs of stuff up. Come the fall time.
Hogs, bigger's better for that reason. That way, if they do hit you, they won't destroy it all. So.
Yeah. Because that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
The last thing I guess we need to mention on this probably is seed rate.
Seed rate, yeah. If you buy a mix, y'all, from anywhere, whoever you choose, there's so many different kinds out there. If you buy a mix from wherever you choose, they're going to have a seeding rate on how to plant it.
That's going to be suggested.
It's going to be a suggested rate, and most of the time you follow that suggested rate, especially if you're drilling it in, whether no-till or drilling it with a seed drill. You follow that rate, you're going to have plenty of success. Most of the time, that's somewhere around 20 pounds per acre. Most of those mixes plant around 20 pounds,
which is
per
a
acre.
pretty low rate.
Yeah.
Or just pretty small seed too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is.
That's for drilling in, and then like I said, if you're going to broadcast it, more birds are going to get it. It's just you're not going to have near quite the germination rate. They generally say something, double the rate. Double, and definitely cultipack it or drag it or do something to make good seed to soil contact.
And the seed companies and feed stores would love for you to double the rate.
Oh, absolutely. They're all
triple it.
Double the rate. And like I said, and you really do. If you're going to broadcast, and realistically, y'all, most of us don't have a grain drill for food plots. Most of, and I know they make little ATV UT, but most of us are out there disking it with a disc and then broadcasting it with a 3-point broadcaster or something that goes on the back of your four-wheeler, and then you got to pack it or drag it sometimes. So, if the drilling rate says 20 pounds and that's what it says, then probably need to double it for broadcast, for sure.
Yeah, and so, again, you might want to do this, just ahead of a good rain or something to bring it up as quick as possible. The longer it sits there in dry weather, the more the birds are going to eat it.
Sure. So, try to do it with timing. Like I'm always shooting for April 15th, but I'm also shooting and watching the weather. Like, because sometimes, y'all, especially if you're drilling or plowing disc, you can't plant if the ground's too wet, you can't, the drills don't work. So you got to time that anyway. But if you can hit it where you can get it planted right before a good spring rain, man, that's good money, right? That's what you want.
That's right. And you want to get it when there's no danger of frost, which seems to be getting a little later and later. Okay, so I guess let's sum it up, Chancey. And preparing for this, you need to start in the fall, start eliminating competition, get your plans of where you're going to put it, get it laid out, start getting rid of Bermuda grass.
Yeah, see what's growing there. After you pick your spot, determine what's growing there. And if you got warm season grasses there, if you guys are trying to make a pasture, or if you're trying to turn a pasture into a food plot, I'm not saying you can't disc it right now and have some success, but just be prepared to have a weedy field. You're going to have a lot of competition. Your food plot's not going to be pretty like you see in the magazines. If you've got that competition, be thinking in advance.
That's right.
Be thinking about next year. You might can plant it this year, but be thinking about next year.
3 to 5% barrier between transition zone between your cover and your food plot,
especially for deer. For deer, I love that buffer. A buffer from the cover to the food plot. It helps hunting. It helps everything. It's pretty, in my mind, real critical for deer as far as success rate. That's important. Like I said, the amount. 3 to 5% of your acreage. You can go bigger. It's what your budget is, what you can afford. And, utilize, rather than taking out quality habitat, utilize old roads or the sides of roads or old fields or pipeline right-of-ways or utilities, right-of-ways. Something that's already there and cleared,
Yeah, that you can spend the least effort on, money.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Most of those are open, you can plant those, and most people are hunting around those anyway.
That's right. Yes, and so preparation, you want to, get the whole key there is to eliminate all competition, to prepare a good seed bed, whether you're drilling or disking or whatever your method is. Fertilization, put your phosphorus and potassium out fall, wintertime. Put your nitrogen out over the top of it, perhaps when you disc it in. Perhaps once it comes up, to make sure you're fertilizing something that you're not wasting money on something that didn't even come up. And then choose your right blend.
Yes.
What's your species goal? What are you trying to raise? What are you trying to attract? What are you trying to do? What grows well in your area? And last but not least, seeding rate, roughly 20 pounds per acre.
Drill.
More if broadcasting and disking or cultipacking or doing any of that kind of thing. So that kind of sums up summer and spring food plots.
Yeah, I think so in a nutshell. And I said, reach out, y'all, if you have any specific questions. But it's something that's, if you want to plant one now, it should be on your mind. Right now, be thinking about soil sample or doing, something like that. If you're going to start from scratch, be thinking about that.
And so to answer a couple questions, that kind of wraps that up. Me and Chancey have a couple friends, Amanda, who we know as Amanda Bauer, and Matthew McDermott, have both recently asked this question about chestnut trees, and if they plant them, will they attract deer? And so I guess I should also mention that Matthew McDermott married a friend of ours, Kelly, and they're expecting twins here in a few weeks.
Congratulations,
yeah.
Matthew
So,
and Kelly. That's great news.
The last thing he's going to have time for is chestnut trees, but so me and Chancey got to talking about it. And we're like, chestnut trees, they make a good food for wildlife.
Oh yeah, they were a wonderful tree, and I Brad brought this up to me, and I hadn't really heard about it because I'm thinking, well, chestnut trees are basically extinct in North America because of the fungus that we brought over. So
and used to be there used to be a lot of them.
Yeah, in the eastern United States forest, kind of like the days of the passenger pigeon and all that. They were a giant tree, and they're in the same family as the Fagaceae, the beech and oak type family. So they make a great nut that I'm sure wildlife do absolutely love. But it's neat they said that because I've never thought about planting any of them. I plant the daylights out of acorns, and oak trees, and even have planted some beech trees in East Texas. But I never thought about it from a wildlife standpoint, and I guess because I've always just considered it was, the blight knocks them out. But evidently there's some people that are hybridizing them and, trying to get some to be successful in areas.
And so there used to be this American chestnut tree.
Yes.
It grew well on the East Coast, and it grew well in
Appalachia.
It takes kind of acidic soils, like a pH of 4.5 to 6.5 for them to do well. Has to be sandy, doesn't do well in clay soils, has to drain well. Apparently needs quite a bit of rainfall. Because if you look at the maps of where they used to grow native, it was pretty high rainfall.
Yeah, probably 15 inches of rain a year.
Yes,
or more.
And so it could be the fact that they just don't do well in our area, and along with the fact that they're pretty much almost the American chestnut trees almost pretty much extinct due to this blight or this fungus that came from China at some point with a chestnut tree species from overseas.
Yeah, I think we imported some Chinese chestnuts, and I think it was an Asian blight. They call it from Asia. It might have come from China or Japan or one of them. But this fungus came along with these trees, and the Chinese chestnuts are adapted to it. They can tolerate it. But it wiped out in a period of 50 years our entire America. I think they said it was like 4 billion American chestnuts, and in 50 years it just totally wiped them out, this blight. And it's still there today.
Yeah, apparently, if you plant one today, it still gets the tree.
Yeah, from what I've read, but even like that said, it'll still eventually get it. So I guess you could, if you did. I've heard that the American Chestnut Society is trying to make, some hybrids that are resistant to the blight. And, that's a chance, that for success right there. I think that shows some promise. But then again, in Texas or in our area, you probably need to be east. And here you're probably looking at soils with the pH and the rainfall. Areas east of I-45, really, that get, a lot more rain than 30 inches a year average. And that soil pH is more acidic. And you get out, it sounds like it likes that well-drained sand, kind of like where beech trees grow.
That's true. Yeah, I'm sure it would be great deer food.
Oh yeah, I guarantee.
And for lots of other wildlife, squirrel.
Everything. Us,
they're fun to roast on open fire.
Yeah, so I hear.
Yeah, dead gum if they want to become extinct.
Yeah.
But probably wouldn't grow good in our area of Central Texas. And if you could, you better get a Chinese variety or something that's well adapted to this blight.
Sure, and and if you did grow it, and say you did have success, because we've got some acidic soils in Malone County.
And it might be worth a shot.
Worth a shot, especially if you want to plant it in your yard and baby it.
I mean, how cool would that be if you were the guy that brought back the American chestnut tree to Central Texas?
Yeah, which I don't know if it ever occurred here in Central Texas. But
what if you were the guy that brought American chestnut?
But they say they grow fast
tree.
And they're a beautiful tree. I've never seen one, a great big one.
I've seen pictures and they are nice trees.
They're beautiful and the big old fruit. So that would be, if it's in your yard, you put it in your yard, I don't know. To me, it's worth a shot. Try it. You can baby it and water it, give it 60 inches a year or whatever it needs. Heck, it may do well, and you may not get chestnut blight in it,
Hey, you just might be that guy.
Hey, well, genetic variation is everything. So you plant 1,000 chestnuts, one, who knows?
You better plant more than one.
Yeah.
Maybe that's right. That one that grows just might be a new species, and we can name it after you.
Yeah. Different variety for sure, or subspecies.
Different variety. Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that. But I guess that wraps up today. Pretty much all I could think of. I mean, on the farm, there's a little bit going on. I forgot to mention that now's the time to be top dressing wheat and our oats. It's starting to warm up enough, and sprayers are running out in the wheat fields, putting out fertilizer. Mostly just straight nitrogen right now. It's up quite a bit, but you still can't make a crop without it. fungicides. There's systemic fungicides that people are putting out that will help with controlling rust and all those types of things that's going to be coming up. Insects. There's several insects out there right now that are affecting wheat. So right now is a good time to put a little shot of fertilizer, a little shot of fungicide, and a little shot of insecticide, along with herbicide if you got competition out there. Henbit's still a problem. There's a lot of henbit out there. This year is especially bad. Good time. I mean, it's inexpensive. Make you a little cocktail of all these things for your insects, for your nutritional needs and your fungus and everything else. Go out there, hit it. About to warm up, and wheat and oats about to take off, start growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a few warm days, and the warm days aren't going to come this week for sure, but the days are coming. And so I guess that kind of wraps it up today, and we enjoy visiting with y'all. Chancey, enjoy visiting with you once again, my friend.
Always, partner.
And I hope y'all have a good week, and I guess we'll talk to y'all next week.
Y'all take care.